That's about all, I think. Oh, except that young Johnson asked me to call in last week.
Johnson?
Yes, the chap in Elm Drive. It seems he'd had a bit of a shock that morning.
The bill? The electricity bill? Now, don't forget the immersion heater was your idea. Well, tell me the worst. But it's nothing like as bad as I expected. Tom's bill was terrific when they fitted a heater.
If you'd seen the heater in Tom's kitchen, you'd know why.
Clever girl. It was probably badly installed. I'll get that chap from the electricity board who fitted ours and take him down there.
Of course, she was dead right, George. The conversion of this fellow Tom's ancestral hot water system to electricity was one of the worst lash-ups I've ever seen.
What are you going to do with it?
I shall fit a self-contained heater.
Should have been fitted in the first place.
Of course it should.
You know, a practical case like this makes my lecture tonight a bit silly.
Oh? What's the subject? Planning the ideal solid fuel installation for conversion to electricity. Very sensible. I'm all for it.
Would you care to read it?
Yes. No, you read it. Try it on the dog.
Right. You'll have to imagine me doing the demonstrations.
Oh, I'll try.
Chip in if you've got any suggestions.
Right.
The heart of the solid fuel hot water installation is the boiler. It can be an independent boiler, usually placed in the kitchen, or a back boiler behind a kitchen range, or behind a living room fire, or behind a stove. But one and all, they must be sited near a flue. So the position of the boiler is fixed. Next, we need a storage vessel. In some districts, a copper cylinder is used. In others, a rectangular galvanized iron tank. Now, where shall we put this storage vessel? Must it be close to the boiler to keep the flow and the return pipe short and so prevent heat losses? Not necessarily, for in winter these pipes will help to heat the house, and in summer, when we use electricity, there'll be no hot water circulating in them. It's much more important to avoid a long pipe between the cylinder and the sink. For every time the sink tap is used, and that's more often than any other tap in the house, heat will be wasted. You see, the hot water left in the pipes leading to the sink will cool rapidly, and it must be run off before more hot water can flow.
I've seen pipes in which you have to draw 6 pints of cool water before they run hot.
Yes, and if that happens, let's say, 10 times a day, it means 50 gallons of hot water are lost every week. As I say, the amount lost depends on the length of the draw-off pipe to the sink. So, let's put our cylinder beside the sink.
You'd better warn them about a long horizontal flow pipe, hadn't you?
I was just coming to that. When the boiler is idle and electricity is being used, the water in the vertical length of flow pipe will be colder and heavier than the water in the cylinder. This may set up a back circulation of water through the boiler. The longer the horizontal length of flow pipe, the colder the water in the vertical portion, and the greater the risk of this heat-wasting back circulation. It can be entirely prevented if the flow pipe is kept at nearly the same temperature as the hot storage, either by enclosing the pipe under the insulation of the vessel, or by running it up inside the vessel as a standpipe, or, as in some districts, by taking the flow pipe into the storage vessel immediately above the return pipe. So, finally, we've found the best possible place for the storage vessel. But we may not have the last word. "Why clutter up my kitchen?" cries the housewife. "Put it in my airing cupboard." So, upstairs it goes. Well, fortunately for us, the position of the chosen cupboard is not too far from sink or boiler. Wherever we put the vessel, we must leave room for the immersion heater, and 3 inches all round for insulation.
Do you really need 3 inches?
Yes, please, 3 inches of good insulation if possible. If a 30-gallon cylinder is left bare, about 85 units of electricity a week can be lost. With only 1 inch of lagging, we can reduce this to about 16 units lost. But with 3-inch lagging, we need only lose about 6 units a week.
And what do you call a good insulating material?
I always recommend granulated cork, slag wool, or glass fibre, all of which are better insulators and are easily applied by surrounding the vessel with a container. Well, ready-made jackets are very simple, of course, but they're seldom much more than 1 inch thick. Personally, I'm not fond of magnesia cement for this sort of job. It's a bit messy to apply, not easy to build into a 3-inch jacket. In summer, sufficient heat for airing will escape through the insulation however good we make it. In winter, when the boilers are light, the extra heat needed to air clothes can be provided by a small heating loop from the flow and return pipes.
Unless, of course, the vessel is high up in the cupboard, when the flow and return pipes themselves will supply the extra heat.
Yes. Next, we must supply the cylinder with cold water. So we must fit a cistern, and this must be fitted with a ball valve. We place the cistern at a high point, even in the loft if it's permissible, and from it we lead a cold water feed pipe down to the cylinder. The cold water must enter the storage vessel at a low level in such a way as to give good stratification.
I think I put that more simply.
All right then. So that the entering cold water does not mix with the hot water in the cylinder. Now, with the cylinder, the cold feed pipe will be taken to the boss provided at the side. So, the cold water will enter horizontally without mixing unduly with the hot water in the upper part. Side entry is also the best arrangement for a tank. But in some cases, the cold feed is brought through the top and down an inverted standpipe. This prevents mixing, but may cause loss of heat through single pipe circulation.
You're going to explain single pipe circulation, I hope?
Certainly. Hot water in any vertical pipe will rise up the center of the pipe, and the cooler water will flow down the walls, causing single pipe circulation, which may waste a lot of heat.
Yes, but this happens to be a cold feed pipe.
True. But when no water is being drawn off, the hot water in the tank will raise the temperature of the standpipe and the water in it, so causing single pipe circulation. Sometimes the cold feed to a tank is taken in at the bottom, but mixing will occur unless a T is fitted as a baffle. Obviously, the cold feed pipe must never have a smaller diameter than the main draw-off pipe, because cold water must flow into the cylinder as fast as the hot flows out. Well, having maneuvered the cylinder near the sink, don't throw away this advantage by taking the draw-off pipe all round the world. There's the high-level draw-off pipe, which branches to the sink, and then runs to the bath taps and the others. Then there's the low-level draw-off, from an internal standpipe, which branches as before. Or again, a combination of the two, where the standpipe serves the sink, and the high-level draw-off serves the rest of the house. Of course, all pipes must be the right size, or in feeding one, you'll starve the rest.
I should add, but don't make the sink pipe larger than necessary.
Right. The vessel also needs a vent pipe to get rid of air and steam. But here's where you always get heat losses through single pipe circulation. So the vent must be run horizontally for at least 18 inches, just above the vessel.
While the top of the vent pipe should run up to discharge over the cistern.
Yes, I'll write that in. Vent, discharge, over system. Good. Now, having lagged our storage to conserve heat in summer, we may find it overheats when using the boiler. Therefore, let's circulate this excess hot water through radiators and towel rails. But we must be careful, for if they're connected to the draw-off piping or to the flow pipe at too high a level, electrically heated water will pass wastefully through them in summer. This we must avoid at all costs. We must connect them at a lower level, or better still, provide a separate circuit from the boiler. And that completes our solid fuel system. Now, let's add a thermostatically controlled immersion heater.
Thermostatically controlled, eh? What about the 3-heat switch?
As an alternative, don't like 'em. They're all right with a thermostat. Anyway, thermostats don't cost much more and are very reliable. Besides, they give you constant hot water without the bother of switching on and off. The heater can be fitted vertically through the top of the vessel. In this case, a layer of hot water will collect at the top of the vessel. The depth of this layer will gradually increase. A circulator with a tube round the element to restrict circulation produces a similar effect even if the heater is not placed vertically. In any case, the length determines the total amount of water heated. It can also be fitted from the side, where it'll heat all the water above the element gradually. And from the bottom, where it'll give a compromise between the other two positions.
And incidentally, where a shorter element will heat all the water in the vessel. Are you going to say anything about hard water?
Ah, yes, that's a good point. If the water's hard, don't use a circulator, because scale will soon clog the outlet hole and the element will burn out. This will give you an idea of what scale can do.
While you're about it, George, say a bit about mixing copper and galvanized iron.
Bimetallic corrosion. Yes, I've got a pretty good sample.
Pretty bad, you mean?
Don't be tempted to fit copper pipes in connection with a galvanized hot water storage vessel. And avoid, wherever possible, mixing copper and galvanized iron in one installation. You may get away with it, but...
You have been warned.
Lastly, a word about thermostats. They're usually combined with the heater to avoid cutting two holes. As a thermostat is affected by the average temperature along its length, when placed vertically, it should obviously be as long as the heater to register the mean temperature in the vessel. Whereas, when horizontal, its length is not critical because it lies in a water layer of even temperature. But it must be at more or less the same level as the heater. Finally, to recap, here are the vital points in our system. Storage vessel near the sink, no back circulation through the boiler, a well-lagged vessel, the draw-off pipe to the sink is as short as possible. The cold water feed does not mix with the stored hot water. No single pipe circulation in the cold water feed or in the vent pipe. Electrically heated water cannot circulate wastefully through the towel rails and radiators. The right type of immersion heater is fitted in the most suitable position. The heater is controlled by a thermostat. Here ended, etc., etc.
For an outline of first principles, George, I think that's pretty good.
Maybe.
What more do you want?
Thanks. Well, it's all theory. Hearing about that Elm Drive case reminded me I ought to give them some practical applications.
Yes, I suppose you should.
Got any ideas?
Well, let's have a look at the old case book. Yes, here's one for you. The house was an elderly Victorian mansion in the suburbs. The basic installation wasn't much younger than the house, and generations of plumbers, professional and, well, not so professional, had tried to keep it up to date. The range had been replaced by a fairly modern independent boiler in the kitchen, with flow and return piping leading upstairs. The storage vessel, a tank, was in the linen cupboard, and not too badly sited, being next door to the bathroom and above the kitchen. Space heating consisted of a radiator on the landing and a towel rail in the bathroom. Miss Bennett, the consumer, had asked for an immersion heater. Were there any snags? The first thing that sprang to mind were the space heaters. How were they supplied? Unfortunately, from the flow and return pipes in the airing cupboard. Well, that just wouldn't do. I explained to Miss Bennett that if the boiler was out, the electrically heated water would circulate through the radiator and towel rail. I should like to have run fresh piping direct to the boiler down in the kitchen, but she wouldn't stand for the expense. So, although I didn't like to do it, I advised fitting a valve to shut off the space heaters when the immersion heater was in use.
I hope you wrote to her saying you wouldn't be responsible for the bill if the valve was left open while the heater was on.
I most certainly did. Next, I carried out a routine check on the installation. The boiler was alight, so first I tried the sink tap. It ran cold for a long time. I collected nearly 6 pints in all. A pretty big dead leg, considering the vessel was only just overhead. So I started to trace the draw-off piping. It ran up to the bath, across the landing to the bedroom basin, and all the way back under the floor and down to the sink. Now, why on earth shouldn't we take a half-inch pipe direct from the draw-off down to the sink, I asked myself.
Too expensive again, I suppose.
Not in the long run. As I told the consumer, savings in losses would soon justify the cost, and she agreed to have it altered. Miss Bennet was also worried because the bath ran cold so quickly. Now, this was odd, because the tank has obviously been meant to provide baths for a large Victorian family. Still, everyone has different ideas about the size of a decent tub, so I decided to check up. Sure enough, it ran tepid after a few minutes. I found the cold feed entered the top of the tank, which implied a dip pipe inside. Perhaps the trouble lay there. Sure enough, later we decided to take off the manhole to fit the heater, and we found some idiot had forgotten to fit the dip pipe at all. The cold feed was pouring straight into the top of the hot storage. As usual, I warned my plumber not to leave in the tank any of the steel chippings he'd made while cutting a hole for the heater. Steel chips are bound to cause corrosion in a galvanized tank.
Yes, that's an excellent example. Bimetallic corrosion, in fact. Don't leave steel chips behind after cutting holes in tanks.
Here's another job in an old house, one which is being altered into flats on the upper 2 floors with a maisonette below. The boiler and cylinder in the basement are to be used by the maisonette. The cylinder is fixed horizontally under the kitchen ceiling, making good stratification most unlikely, which is one good reason against the use of an immersion heater. But furthermore, the sink tap is taken from the flow pipe between the boiler and the cylinder, which, as you know, was an old idea to provide a quick supply of hot water at the sink. It won't work with an immersion heater, of course, because some of the water will run to the tap the long way round, via the return pipe and the boiler, and will be so cold that we only get tepid water at the tap. So, in a case like this, I recommend the fitting of some type of self-contained heater for use in summer. By the way, you said nothing about them so far.
All right, then. Self-contained heaters are factory-assembled insulated vessels containing an electric element and a thermostat, which are fitted as complete units. These heaters may be of the one-point non-pressure type, controlled at the inlet, and they may be supplied direct from the mains if they do not hold more than 3 gallons. Or the larger multi-point pressure type, supplied from an external system. The latter type includes the popular 2-in-1 heater with 2 thermostatically controlled elements, the lower of which needs switched on when a lot of hot water is needed. There's also a cistern heater, which is a pressure type containing its own cold water cistern and bulb. This type may be connected direct to the mains, however large its capacity.
Well, in the case of this maisonette, on my advice, the landlord decided to have a 2-in-1 heater fitted close to the sink, under the draining board, connected in series with the old draw-off pipe, with a bypass and 2 valves fitted at A and B. A new vent for the heater, and a new connection to the sink tap. When valve A is shut, the electric heater can boost hot water from the cylinder, or heat cold water from the cylinder if the boiler is not alight. Or when valve B is shut, the hot water from the cylinder goes direct to the taps. The flats had no solid fuel system. In the top one, the main cistern was lower than the taps, so we connected a cistern-type heater direct to the cold water main. In the middle flat, we couldn't get a 2-in-1 under the draining board, so we fitted an ordinary pressure heater as near the sink as we could.
Yes, flats are interesting. You had any problems with large blocks?
I've got one now. Where there's no central hot water system, and every flat needs its own heater, it's a bit tricky. For instance, here's a case of a block of flats with several floors. We could fit 2-in-1 heaters, but it would be uneconomical to run miles of individual cold feed and vent pipes. A common feed pipe with a stopcock at the top is preferable. But even so, if the stopcock is closed and a tap in the bottom flat is opened, hot water may be drawn from the upper flats. Even if we take each branch pipe off the main at a higher level than the heater it serves, hot water might still be siphoned from the higher flats. So we vent the downfeed pipe below its stopcock and admit air to prevent siphoning.
Yes, I suppose each flat really needs its own stopcock.
Yes, but not the loose jumper type,
Oh, why?
because it would prevent expansion from a heater from travelling up the cold feed and would force it up the vent pipe, causing a discharge of hot water into the system and a wastage of heat.
I see.
The same sort of thing happens if the upper flats are starved due to wrong sizing of the pipes. Variations of pressure in the system may then cause surging through the vent pipes.
What happens if the cold feed freezes near the system?
Then the main vent can't function and again siphoning may occur. Worse, if the other vent pipes are frozen as well, a partial vacuum may occur in the upper storage vessels which might collapse them. We guard against this by fitting an anti-vacuum valve alongside each branch pipe's stopcock, and against excessive pressure in the vessels by fitting each one with a safety valve.
In any case, the heaters must also be strong enough to withstand the pressure due to the head of the building.
Naturally, but standard heaters are okay for anything up to 60-foot head. Another method is to fit small cold feed cisterns in each flat, and from them feed 2-in-1 heaters. The installation in each flat being vented to its own system.
Or better still, I suppose, use cistern-type heaters.
Yes, but don't forget they can't be fitted as near the sink taps as the 2-in-1 heaters under the draining boards, because the cistern part of the heater must be sufficiently high above the taps to give a reasonable head of water.
Yes, self-contained heaters seem to be the answer to most problems.
Well, quite a few. For instance, here's a case in point. An indirect job.
That reminds me. Indirect systems are... Oh, it's no good, I shall have to draw one. The boiler is not connected to the storage vessel direct, but to a heater inside it. This primary circuit is thus separate from the draw-off system, and the same water simply circulates round and round, thus saving the boiler from flaring up in hard water districts. There, how's that?
Clean bowled. Now, have you finished interrupting? The job in question was a pretty palatial residence with an elaborate indirect system. The cylinder was a new one on me, and I couldn't tell at first glance if I could fit an immersion heater or not. I was just debating whether to take off the manhole cover, or wait and write to the makers, when I realized that immersion heaters were out in any case.
Why?
The taps were so far from the cylinder that the draw-off pipe was a circulating loop, which would have wasted a lot of heat if we'd fitted an immersion heater. To make matters worse, there were various radiators and towel airers which would also have wasted electricity. Here again, self-contained heaters seemed most suitable, and our main problem was to know where to put them. 2 bedroom basins and the small bathroom lay directly over the downstairs lavatory and the kitchen, so we decided to use a multi-point heater for that group. A 2-in-1 fitted under the draining board. We were left with the main bathroom and upstairs lavatory, and the 3 bedrooms in the other wing, which we supplied from a 30-gallon self-contained heater fitted near the bathroom. In that case, of course, the cost of conversion was one of the last things to consider. But more often it is a prime factor.
Yes, I must talk about costs.
For instance, only last week I was called to one of those small houses on the new town estate. The housewife was dead keen to have constant hot water, but didn't want to light the back boiler in the living room all the year round. The case seemed to cry out for an immersion heater. But there was a very long run to the sink. Also, there was only room round the tank for an apology for insulation, which would mean high costs if the heater was left switched on under thermostatic control. So we fitted a sink heater to give her all the hot water she needed for household chores. And now she only has to light the boiler for baths and on washing day. Need any more cases?
No, I reckon I got enough for one lecture.
Good. How are you going to finish?
Ready for a pint, I should think. I shall probably give them a problem. You know, what would you do, chums?
Fine. And if teacher doesn't know the answer, he'll probably find it in here.